Story 1, Apollo 11. Just watch it. It is perhaps the highest quality footage you will ever see of random people in 1969, and it is gorgeous. Story 2, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Someone mentioned to me yesterday that Mr. Rogers always made her uncomfortable. I told her to watch this documentary. I never knew the depth of his care for everyone and how much he did for public broadcasting service. I need to watch it again. Story 3, Robert Crumb is known for his unique and unconventional style. Although I have not read any of his comics, I find him to be a fascinating figure, and his family is equally unusual. Story 4, Free Solo is an incredible movie. I watched it in the cinema when it was released, and my hands were sweating the entire time. Story 5, Bitter Lake, Hypernormalization, or Century of the Self. It is difficult to choose a favorite, but they are all essential viewing in my opinion. Story 6, Searching for Sugar Man is not only the best documentary I have ever seen, it is one of my favorite stories. It is a story that could probably never happen again with the internet. An American musician in the 1970s does not realize his music is more popular than the Beatles or Elvis Presley in South Africa. The documentary explores who he was, what happened to him, and why he did not know about it. It is absolutely fascinating. Story 7, OJ, Made in America. I cannot praise this documentary enough. It is one of the very few films I would call a masterpiece. Story 8, Hoop Dreams. Hope, tragedy, resilience, economic struggle, educational victories, sports, and teenage problems. It had it all. Story 9, Dear Zachary. A letter to a son about his father is a very well-made documentary, but it destroyed my soul. I also really liked Tower. It was different but definitely worth watching. Story 10. The Up series follows children every 7 years as they grow up, from age 7 to 63. It is filled with questions about the extent to which class and genetics influence destiny, how different life priorities affect individuals, and how seemingly small decisions can lead one's life in a completely different direction. Story 11, Dear Zachary, Paradise Lost, Brother's Keeper, Capturing the Freedmans, Hypernormalization, The Corporation. Story 12, Check out documentaries. Most eye-opening to me was Witch Hunt, 2008. Another informative film that many people are unaware of is Divorce Corp, 2014. Story 13, Waiting for Superman. I have attended both underperforming and high-quality school districts. Some of the content in that documentary accurately explains why school districts with fewer resources perform significantly worse than expected. Story 14, definitely not the best, but I want to show some love for Tiger King. It arrived during COVID-19 and it was quite a ride. A great distraction from the pandemic, with bizarre characters all around and the birthplace of a million memes. Story 15, Not Super Serious? The Alpinist. There's a mixed climbing scene where he's switching between ice and rock that will make you feel intense suspense. Story 16, Obligatory, Idiocracy. Regarding serious documentaries, Planet Earth comes to mind, but I'm not certain it fully addresses the question. Story 17, not my favorite, but I'll share one you won't hear from anyone else here. It's something like Glitter and Greed, the Lisa Frank story. Story 18, a lesser-known but intriguing film is Mr. Death, the rise and fall of Fred Luchter. It follows a man with no experience who ends up designing execution methods for American penitentiaries and becomes involved in investigating Auschwitz. Despite lacking experience and a solid understanding of science, the story is fascinating. Story 19, one of the natural documentaries narrated by David Attenborough. I am unsure which one is the best. Story 20, Restrepo probably. The soldier playing Blink-182's Stay Together for the Kids, and then never coming home kinda sticks with you. Story 21, Dear Zachary. A letter to a son about his father. Warning, do not search for it before watching. Also, do not watch if you are feeling depressed. Story 22, from the Caught on Camera series about the Boxing Day tsunami. It was well done and difficult to watch at the same time. Story 23. Uno de rayos ultravioletas lo vi hace muchos años y jamás encontré nada sobre él. Lo pusieron en la televisión y lo vi con mi familia. Me quedé con grabado el documental porque se veían imágenes de cómo los rayos ultravioletas afectaban a personas en el cielo en avión o a personas en las minas a 1000 metros bajo tierra, dando la idea de que uno no se puede salvar de ellos. Story 24. The best option has already been taken, but I would like to mention another one that I really enjoy, King Corn. A couple of individuals investigate the United States corn growing industry and how it negatively impacts small farmers in favor of large agricultural companies. At the same time, they spend a season on a farm attempting to grow a cornfield. Story 25. Warning ahead of time. Most of these are going to be true crime and cult documentaries. If that's not for you, skip to the non-true crime section. The Keepers on Netflix is probably one of my favorite true crime documentaries, partly because it involves an unsolved case from my area that has a grassroots movement trying to solve it several decades later. The program, Cons, Cults and Kidnapping, and Hell Camp, Teen Nightmare were eye-opening for me regarding those tough love camps and re-education schools that were popular when I was a kid. I was never in favor of these types of places, but I was a troublesome child growing up, and discussions about such programs were frequent. It's crazy to think this could have been my experience had my family had enough money to send me away. If you're a fan of Dick Wolf's writing or Law and Order, you might like Homicide New York and Homicide Los Angeles. Both of these documentaries feature prosecutors and detectives discussing their most harrowing cases. If you're not squeamish about child cases, Who Killed JonBenet Ramsey and The Disappearance of Madeleine McCann are two documentaries I think most people should watch. These were two of the most famous child kidnapping cases of the 1990s for multiple reasons. The media created a huge circus around them. There was notable police incompetence that potentially ruined the chances of solving these cases, and the parents of these children are still hoping for answers today. I'm glad these documentaries were made because I remember how the constant media coverage in the 1990s vilified the parents heavily. These documentaries offer a different perspective that we never saw at that time. Non-true crime documentaries, Butterfly in the Sky and Won't You Be My Neighbor, are wonderful documentaries about two of the most influential childhood shows to ever grace television, Reading Rainbow and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It is fascinating to see how these shows came to be, learn about the hosts that made them possible, and recognize the positive influences television can have on people's lives. Rewind the 90s was quite a throwback to watch. Each episode tackles a different influential topic of 1990s culture and discusses its impacts then and their lasting effects today. This one is great for people who want to know a little about what the 1990s were like, serving as a good starting point for a comprehensive understanding, though many of these topics could each warrant their own documentary. There are also a few other decade documentaries in the Rewind series. If this documentary feels a little too light for you, try watching Dark Side of the 90s alongside it. If you're okay with YouTube documentaries, Mini Minuteman primarily focuses on pseudoscience debunking, but he also has many great videos discussing various archaeological finds and studies, along with insightful talks on the importance of science communication to reach audiences outside of academia. I particularly appreciate that he corrects himself when called out on mistakes. I think it enhances the credibility of his channel. Lastly, a more niche recommendation. Aspen in the Moment has several documentary-style videos discussing drama in the fiber arts community and craft hobby controversies. My favorite topics they've covered include their deep dive into Ravelry, the insane history of Hobby Lobby, the Fiberfest Wool and Folk event, and the rise and fall of Joann's Fabric Store. Story 26. The Wrecking Crew is about the studio musicians who played instruments on numerous popular albums from the 1950s to the late 1970s and never received official credit for their contributions. Story 27. Not the best, but my favorite is King of Kong, which is about setting the Donkey Kong record. It features all the zany characters, including a mullet-haired egomaniac hot sauce salesman with a trophy wife as the antagonist. It's a great underdog story. Story 28. One of my favorites is 80 Blocks from Tiffany's. It is a 1979 documentary about gangs in New York City. It provides significant perspective on how the middle class and urban life have changed over the last several decades. Story 29. Wild Wild Country was an incredibly balanced documentary series. You saw things from everyone's point of view and felt sympathy. Don't get me wrong, the cult consisted of some extreme individuals, but at times you found yourself rooting for them and then rooting for the townspeople. You can't fault them for using the concept of democratic representation to their advantage. Story 30. The World at War was a production by ITV in the UK in the late 1970s, narrated by Laurence Olivier. It is the best documentary I have ever seen. Story 31. Harlan County, USA by Barbara Koppel. Grey Gardens by the Maysles Brothers. Sound and Fury by Josh Aronson. Story 32. Though I'm not entirely sure it's the best I've seen, I personally loved My Octopus Teacher. Marine life is fascinating, and I have always had a soft spot for octopuses. Combined with the visuals and storytelling, it was a truly moving experience. Story 33. Plastercaster was a groupie who created plaster casts of rock stars' body parts. Her pride and joy was Jimi Hendrix. The interview with Tom Snyder, where he tries not to laugh, is hilarious. It's a truly great rock documentary. Story 34. Dear Zachary, if you haven't seen it, it seems like it will be sweet, then sad, but it also has a really funny turn. Story 35. Maybe not the best ever made, but I'm proud of one I worked on called The Work, about a group therapy session inside Folsom Prison. We were in pre-production for over a year. It's intense and eye-opening. Story 36. American Movie. It's for anyone who has ever had a dream. It is also the funniest movie you will ever see. Story 37. PBS Nova Must See. Shackleton's Voyage of Endurance. Lost at Sea, The Search for Longitude. If you made it this far, do yourself a favor and set some time aside for either of these. They are brilliant. Story 38. For Sama. If you want to explore the horrors and beauty of humanity, you will be taken on a journey. Story 39. Out of Time. Saving the DeLorean Time Machine. It chronicles the 2-year journey of a small group of Back to the Future fans dedicated to saving and restoring the screen-used DeLorean Time Machine. Story 40. Recently, I watched Kings of Tupelo. It may not rank high for most, but it's like Talladega Nights meets a murder mystery and conspiracy theory. I started it as background noise, and 20 minutes later, I couldn't look away. Story 41. Touching the Void is an intense story of survival told by the men who experienced it. It features one of my favorite moments in any documentary, where a man believes he is dying and gets a song stuck in his head. He decides he doesn't want to die to the tune of Boney M. Bowling for Columbine left me feeling like I had been hit with a 2x4 as I walked out of the cinema. Story 42. The Endless Summer, 1966. There has never been a more laid-back presentation of such a radical subject before or since. Story 43. Japan Tsunami. Caught on camera. Incredible footage and interviews with survivors of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. One of the most arresting and humbling experiences to witness. The power of nature is truly astonishing. Story 44. My favorites are American Movie. A guy in Wisconsin trying to make masterpiece horror films with his family and friends. The dysfunction and daring are relatable and moving. Mike is truly one of the best people ever featured in a documentary. Burden of Dreams. An increasingly despairing and endlessly stubborn Werner Herzog attempts to create a massive film in the muddy, remote Amazon jungle, navigating tribal warfare and Klaus Kinski's madness. These are comfort movies for me. Story 45. I absolutely adore Errol Morris documentaries. Mr. Death. The Rise and Fall of Fred A. Lookter Jr. is one I keep coming back to. It's definitely worth a watch. Story 46. Hypernormalization. This Place Rules. A Glitch in the Matrix. Jodorowsky's Dune. Food Incorporated. Minimalism. Who Killed Malcolm X? Story 47. A documentary about TWA Flight 800. I am convinced the government accidentally took down our own plane. Story 48. Grey Gardens is a documentary about the lives of Edith Bouvier Beale and her daughter, Edith Beale Jr. The 1975 film explores the experiences of these two reclusive women living in East Hampton, New York. Story 49, Senna and Apollo 11. I have found that the best documentaries are the ones that contain the most actual footage of the subject and events. Otherwise, it is better to read a book on the topic. Story 50, The Fog of War by Errol Morris. Crazy McNamara discusses World War II while avoiding the topic of Vietnam. Story 51. My recommendation is not for the faint of heart. It is Earthlings. I'm warning you, it will deeply affect you and likely change your perspective on animals, food, and the world. It is truly the most disturbing movie I have ever seen. I have watched Salo, Martyrs, Cannibal Holocaust, and Irreversible. Story 52, March of the Penguins. The Yes Men, An Inconvenient Truth. Crumb, Grizzly Man, Touching the Void. Three Identical Strangers. Man on Wire. Story 53, tie with two Ken Burns series, The West and the National Parks. The Civil War did not resonate with me as much as those other two. Story 54, Ken Burns' baseball is more boring than the sport it documents, which is a monumental achievement in itself. Story 55, Pepsi, Where's My Jet? This is a great story featuring compelling characters, both good and bad corporate figures. It serves as a study in friendship and ambition. Story 56. Life on our planet is incredibly well done, showcasing how life has existed on Earth and the developments of animals and plants. Story 57. Fire. The Greatest Party That Never Happened. I keep this on a loop sometimes because it has a mix of everything I like. Suspense, people making poor decisions in a public way, and insightful interviews. It has it all. It's always great to see someone expose themselves through their actions. Story 58. Operation Barbarossa aired on the History Channel back in the days before the alien conspiracy theories took over the nighttime shows. Story 59. I can't remember the name, but it was a 1970s movie about how a group of high school students worked together to secure funding to attend a conference in Texas. Story 60. I wasn't that interested in the subject, 1960s underground cartoonist Robert Crumb, but the documentary is so well made that I was enthralled. Crumb is a unique person, but when the rest of his family is introduced, they make him seem normal. Story 61. November 13th. Attack on Paris discusses the 2015 terrorist attack in Paris. The documentary is in French and is exceptionally well made. It includes interviews with the families of victims and people who were in the Bataclan, including hostages who were not impressed with the terrorists' skills. American Manhunt. Boston Marathon bombing follows the events surrounding the Boston Marathon bombing. I followed the case extensively and discovered new facts about the manhunt. The third episode focuses on the shooters' backgrounds and their paths to radicalization. 11M. Terror in Madrid covers the 2004 terrorist attack in Madrid. The most compelling part of the documentary is the discussion on the interconnected Muslim terror cells in the United States and Europe at that time and how they have influenced and continue to influence politics in Europe. Story 62. It's much more than just about photons. You will be absolutely mesmerized. Story 63. The French brothers who were filming a New York Fire Department documentary on September 11th are chilling, terrifying, and amazing. It has stuck with me ever since it was released. Story 64. The Farmer's Wife is an early example of the genre. Filmmakers documented the experiences of dryland farmers in the United States, capturing their trials and tribulations right in their kitchens. It is remarkable. Story 65. All watched over by machines of loving grace. Story 66. The entire BBC Horizon series is amazing. I remember watching Horizon to Infinity and Beyond while under the influence of mushrooms in my mid-20s and lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling for 5 straight hours afterward. There are so many mind-blowing ideas in that one short documentary. Story 67. First Kill is an amazing documentary about Vietnam. It features fantastic interviews with veterans and offers good reflections on how we perceive violence. Do soldiers become murderers when they enjoy killing? Is war beautiful? Are all humans capable of monstrous acts? First Kill examines these questions as it explores what war does to the human mind and soul. The depth of the interviews with war correspondent Michael Herr, Pulitzer Prize winner Eddie Adams, and several Vietnam veterans provides insight into the feelings that accompany violence, fear, hate, seduction, and pleasure. In First Kill, Coco Schridber intends to confuse the viewer. She creates an atmosphere in which the audience loses its certainties and is confronted with the ultimate question. Would I pull the trigger? Story 68. I can't decide which is the best I've ever seen, so I will settle for the best I've seen in at least a year. The Color of Medicine. This documentary tells the story of a now defunded and closed city hospital that truly served its community and rose to become one of the premier training institutions. Story 69. Kamari explores how easily people, even intelligent individuals, can be misled by religious con artists. Similarly, The Imposter tells the story of a French man who pretended to be a missing American boy. He was reunited with his U.S. family, who genuinely believed he was the missing son. It is astonishing how completely one can deceive those who are inclined to believe. Story 70. Dear Zachary, a letter to a boy about his father. This documentary may not be the best, but it has affected me deeply. Be forewarned, it will make you very angry and upset. Story 71. Maybe not the best documentaries, but the most entertaining are The Nightmare, which is about sleep paralysis, and Chaos on the Bridge, which discusses the disastrous first 2 seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Story 72. All watched over by machines of loving grace. Apocalypse. The Second World War. Don't mess with cats. They shall not grow old. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.